Start with just talking about who your student is.
Emily is a Year 8 female who was acknowledged to be an exceptionally gifted and talented student in her early years of primary school.
My student is Quincy. He's a Year 8 male student.
Bart is a Year 8 student who has been experiencing academic difficulties. He has been diagnosed with ADHD and auditory processing disorder and has been on ADHD medication for the last 4 years. He has great difficulties with literacy, and this impacts his work across all subject areas.
My student's Graham Garvin, a Year 8 male who shows stronger sense of engagement towards practical and visually based learning methods compared to more traditional structures. He's been identified as some sort of medical issue, however, no background on this issue has been presented. Graham identifies as Indigenous also, and therefore tailoring some of the learning strategies and assessment towards this could positively affect his engagement towards his respective classes. What did you see in the data, and I guess what does that suggest to you?
Emily's NAPLAN scores and academic report displays consistent high levels of achievement, while her behaviour and effort across various subjects such as history, instrumental music, and English are excellent. Her effort in other subjects such as maths and science, alongside her behaviour in these classes, are sitting at a satisfactory level. Her behaviour in science is reported to be unacceptable. Based on a history teacher's observations, support suggestions, and ABC behaviour chart, Emily prefers to work independently, enjoys critical discussions, becomes impatient and disengaged when she's not being challenged or learning anything new, and can direct her frustration towards other students in the class. She prefers to work alone, and her parents in the previous parent-teacher meeting said that they would like Emily to work on her interpersonal and relationship building skills. Emily disengages from lessons easily, and this can result in her expressing her disinterest in a variety of ways that disrupts the learning of others. Her disengagement appears to stem from her finding the work too easy and unchallenging, and or does not see the value in it. The fact she seems to have better behaviour in English, history and music suggests to me, alongside the teacher's observations, that she may enjoy the types of learning activities and content in these subjects that tend to offer more critical engagement, debate and personal input, more so than the hard sciences.
So teamwork and collaboration are 21st century skills. Is there any way you can support Emily in this area while targeting her disengagement?
Yes, so Emily enjoys provocative learning experiences, and these may be used as an incentive to facilitate and maintain positive social interactions in class, especially if these learning experiences require collaboration and group work. While she does appear to become easily frustrated with other students' slower learning pace, as evidenced in the ABC chart and the reports, grouping her with other high-performing students in her class, such as Ishmael, Mary and Zoe, may maintain her cognitive engagement while also theoretically reducing the risk of her becoming frustrated with her peers who can't keep up. But providing her with opportunities to learn positive social and leadership skills such as peer mentoring through learning activities that interest her and maintains her engagement would benefit her learning of essential skills alongside the learning of the entire class.
So in terms of quantitative data, Quincy is a student who has behavioural issues in science and art, where his behaviour is graded as needs improvement in science and unacceptable in art. In English, maths, HP and dance, however, Quincy's behaviour is at a satisfactory level or higher. In terms of qualitative data, Quincy's history teacher states that he struggles with staying focused on task and often avoids participating in the work, and as a result, tends to distract others as well as also being easily distracted by others. When Quincy distracts others, this usually comes in the form of either inappropriate humour or aggression. Aggression has been demonstrated in interactions with Emily, which has included Quincy throwing classroom equipment at her. The data shows that Quincy's best behaved classes are HP and dance, both of which are very practical in nature. To me, this would suggest that Quincy works best in learning environments that are tactile and as a result interest him more than theoretical based subjects. Also, not only are art and science his worst behaved classes, but they're also his lowest achieving classes, which tells me that he may be misbehaving due to being disinterested in the content.
Luke, has there been any observations on how teachers have combated these behavioural issues that you have discussed?
Yes, so in terms of his history teacher, although it's not always consistent, Quincy seems to work best in pairs or in a group. Group work seems to be most effective when he isn't the one in charge of writing or illustrating diagrams for the group. Quincy is much more comfortable providing points in discussion. However, his disruptive behaviour tends to resurface once the class would transition back into individual work.
The data shows that Bart's behaviour is generally very good across his subjects and his effort is generally satisfactory. However, in English his effort needs improvement, which is reflected in his grade of D. He consistently received in maths and science have improved to C's in Year 8, and he received B's in HPE and Industrial Design Technology. His work sample from science indicates that he has difficulties with literacies, which hinder his ability to convey his ideas with proper grammatical conventions, whilst the support plan and maths sample shows that he's confident and can achieve year-level standard in maths. His learning support plan shows that he is in academic recovery group and experiences difficulties with literacy. The data suggests Bart engages more effectively and performs better in subjects with lower literacy components. This is reflected in his higher grades in his design class and physical education classes, which are generally more hands-on. It appears that when he faces these difficulties with literacy components, he becomes stressed and uncomfortable, which hinders his ability to effectively engage in the classwork. Overall, the data suggests he is generally well behaved and engaged in most of his classes. However, he requires additional support to manage his emotions and regain focus and engagement in tasks when he faces greater difficulties. Bart participates in an academic recovery group for English, which suggests that he requires additional support in order to develop the necessary skills and understanding to engage effectively with text across his subjects, which is likely due to his auditory processing disorder and his diagnosis of ADHD. Furthermore, due to his auditory processing disorder, Bart may experience not only difficulties in understanding the teacher's instructions, but also in engaging with tasks requiring auditory skills. He may also get easily distracted from the noises of other students talking or working collaboratively. It posits that due to both of these difficulties and his poor literacy skills, he may become stressed and uncomfortable within his English classroom and disengage in classroom activities.
Zach, regarding Bart's struggles with literacy, how do you think he can be supported to more effectively engage with coursework across his subject areas?
Within the classroom and his academic recovery group, Bart's support staff could assist him by either providing an abridged text or working through the main text with him, highlighting the necessary components or asking guiding questions which may lead Bart towards identifying the key aspects. Bart may also be provided with differentiated instruction, with the task being broken down into steps which are more manageable and identifiable for him.
Graham has had 209 days absent from school in the past 3 years. However, this has improved year by year. Behaviourally, he has drastically improved when he has been at school, having 15 reported incidents 3 years ago, reduced down to just 3 this past year. He has also managed to achieve a satisfactory in all his 2019 classes from his teachers, further supporting this statement. Graham's academic achievement would be considered below average despite a slight improvement year by year. His NAPLAN results indicate from year 3 to 7 a gradual improvement. However, he is still considered to be scoring below average. His 2019 report card supports his NAPLAN results, having failed all core subjects as well as graphics. However, he showed the strongest engagement towards ITD and HPE, having passed both. A previous maths teacher of Graham's made a comment in his assessment of him that he required constant and consistent support within the classroom, whether it be by a teacher or teacher aide or a suitable student. The same teacher also mentioned his propensity to engage in the class more when provided with visual and tactile stimulus. The example being when learning the times tables, he was provided with like MAB blocks, which he said helped him visualize and engage a lot better. It's also interesting to note that after reviewing the data samples provided from maths, science, English, and ITD, that when Graham is provided with written stimulus, his attention to detail and depth decreases, as well as his handwriting. it becomes rushed and lazy. However, when he was provided with visual stimulus like that provided in his ITD and science samples, his depth of answers increased, and interestingly, his handwriting improves drastically.
Jack, you mentioned that a previous maths teacher recommended that Graham should have constant support in the classroom. Moving forward, how do you think such a strategy could be implemented?
Yeah, so the data suggests that Graham responds better to collaborative environments in the classroom through his results in HP and ITD. However, when you look deeper into who the students are in his classes, a few issues do arise. Firstly, it's important to note that a teacher aide won't always be available for every one of Graham's lessons. So having other students in the classroom with the capacity to help Graham's learning will be crucial. The issue with how this has been implemented in the past is that the students in his core subjects like maths, English, science, where he has struggled, are also in the same camp where they aren't achieving the best results. Aside from Nigel, who performed sort of at like a B standard, all his other classmates in 8.01, such as Andrea, Hillary, Orlando, Alani, and Violet, operate at a similar DC standard. As it would be unfair to ask Nigel to personally take Graham under his wing, this is where Graham's previous maths teacher's recommendations seem to have been unable to be implemented. Developing a culture within the class of checking each other's responses to activities and providing feedback to each other prior to any recognition from the teacher would build the students' capacity to take ownership of their learning and help each other out. So do you just want to maybe talk about any key behaviours that you think should be targeted with your student?
Yeah, so her disengagement appears to stem from her disinterest in subjects and learning activities, particularly when she's not intellectually challenged or doesn't see the value in them. Emily disengages from lessons easily, and this can result in her expressing her disinterest in a variety of ways that in turn disrupts the learning of others, including engaging in verbal confrontations with other peers. Her inability to regulate her emotional responses to frustration and her interpersonal skills and positive relationships towards other peers in the class is something I feel that should be addressed as well.
The targeted behaviour for Quincy builds upon from the BSP that was created for him last year. These behaviours include Quincy telling inappropriate jokes and lashing out aggressively towards other students, as it appears he uses these behaviours to avoid participating in the schoolwork. The replacement behaviours that we're targeting Quincy is Quincy to actively engage in the classroom activities without disrupting the work of other students. Quincy should also ask for help if he's unsure about a particular activity. These replacement behaviours are specifically focused towards arts and science, as they're his misbehaved classes.
Bart expresses undesirable emotions when stressed or uncomfortable in difficult situations and disengages when he does not feel capable of adequately completing his classwork. In order to address this, it appears that his literacy skills need to be examined to develop his capacity to effectively engage with the work. He also requires support to develop and implement strategies to cope with his emotions and remain engaged throughout the learning episodes.
Yeah, so 2 key points for me here. I think that providing Graham with an environment that encourages collaboration and equity amongst student results is an important phase to his academic improvement. Currently, he's in a classroom with students similar to him, so it doesn't naturally spark an inner engagement or a sense of competitiveness. And secondly, I think that teaching using a pedagogical framework that incorporates tactile and visual learning strategies and stimulus is crucial. He has shown that when provided an opportunity to learn this way, he is engaged deeper, his personal standards improve, and responses are a lot more thorough and in depth. Something as simple as having Graham write any answers on the whiteboard could be a strategy just to help him visually engage in the classroom. And lastly, what curriculum adaptations are you going to try and implement? So like what's being taught, how's it being taught, are there any setting up adaptations, anything along those sort of lines?
Okay, so for what is being taught, I would, number one, modify modify the complexity of the texts or tasks she is asked to engage in order to challenge her and maintain her engagement in the learning. Number 2, I would provide opportunities to teach and practice mentoring and leadership skills in group work that require specific roles in order to work together for a shared outcome. And number 3, incorporate Emily's interests into the lesson in order to meet the learning goals while personalizing the curriculum to cater towards Emily's specific interests in the subject to try and keep her engaged. As for how it is being taught, I would, number 1, extend the complexity of work Emily is expected to complete in a period of time. Number 2, provide provocative and challenging learning experiences that require her to use her higher order thinking alongside her social skills. And number 3, try to anticipate lessons Emily will not see the value in and be explicit at the start about its importance. And number 4, provide learning opportunities that allow Emily to use her argumentative skill set and personal expression of ideas and opinions through writing tasks, as well as within group work as well. As for the setting adaptations, I would recommend, number 1, visually providing clear learning intentions and the value of them on the board, especially in lessons where Emily is likely to contest the value of it. That way you're not wasting valuable instructional time entering into some sort of debate with Emily on the subject matter. And number 2, group Emily with other high-performing students in class for some tasks, enabling her to engage with peers of similar intellectual levels, such as Ishmael, while easing her into group work that will also require her to practice positive social skills. It would be impractical and a disservice to Emily's development of key skills if she were to be coddled into only working with high-performing students, and so setting up workstations that enable Emily a platform to engage with other peers in the class, in other learning activities that at the same time stimulate Emily's interests may be used as an incentive to facilitate and maintain positive social interactions in class. As for reinforcements, Emily responds well to being challenged without feeling like she's doing extra work. And so could be rewarded for this by allowing her time at the end of the lesson to work on other things of interest to her, and by providing her with autonomy and choice in her work. Emily enjoys provocative learning experiences, and these may be used as well as an incentive to facilitate and maintain positive social interactions in class. If negative, disengaged and antisocial behaviours continue, I would suggest further classroom observations to determine if there are additional issues to consider, such as subtle bullying, a lack of social awareness and specific social and interpersonal skills, as well as potentially an inability to self-regulate emotions, etc. I would also recommend further discussions with Emily herself about her behaviour and how this could be improved in order to benefit her learning and social interactions alongside the learning of everyone else in the class. I would also suggest further discussions with Emily's parents or carers in order to gain a deeper understanding of Emily's interests and behaviour towards others and learning outside of school, and how their involvement may assist Emily's attitude and behaviour at school.
So in last year's BSP, for what is taught, the plans were to modify the complexity of the tasks he is to complete. Also finding out what Quincy's interests are in order to create suitable higher interest low level reading and writing material. This seems to have worked in last year's BSP for Quincy in relation to English, as in his English sample provided. We can see that Quincy's writing skills in terms of actual writing ability perform better when there is added scaffolding into the writing area, as evidenced by the written piece on turtles. The writing becomes neater and easier to read, in addition to the quality of Quincy's writing tends to improve when he isn't required to write about a topic he has no interest in. When looking at how the curriculum is taught, the data is limited in determining how much of the how was actually adopted into the classroom from Quincy's BSP from last year. However, assuming that the strategies discussed in Quincy's BSP from last year were implemented, It can be determined that for maths, these teaching strategies may have led to Quincy's improvement. However, due to the lack of improvement in other areas, we've decided that adjustments are necessary. So the previous BSP suggests that chunking work into small sections and allowing him to do the work in whichever order he'd like, as well as hands-on group work, is most effective for Quincy. The plan is to incorporate practical components into Quincy's classes of art and science as much as possible to increase his engagement. A strategy that was used in last year's BSP for Quincy was to provide him with choices about the topics and the kind of work that he was doing. So for this year's BSP, we'll look to increase the emphasis of providing Quincy with choices in the classrooms, whereas engagement, behaviour and achievement are at their worst, like arts and science. In terms of classroom setting and the learning environment, Quincy is shown to be his best behaved when working in a group. However, according to last year's BSP, teachers had difficulty making use of the workspace and grouping and found that pairing Quincy up with study buddies and a seating plan was much more effective. So in this year's BSP, we'll be looking into continuing emphasising the importance of a seating plan across the learning areas in which his effort and behaviour needs work, but with the added focus on which students he is to be paired with. So for instance, we're going to avoid pairing with Emily, as they don't see eye to eye, and not only will that diminish their learning, but also may distract the rest of the class and prevent them from engaging in the work. In terms of ensuring that Quincy stays motivated, the BSP will look to engage Quincy in activities that are designed for him to quickly achieve results, in which he will then be encouraged and praised for verbally by the teacher. The purpose for this is to ensure that Quincy remains on task in addition to improving his overall behaviour. Finally, if the behaviour continues, the reactive strategies that will be in place are to potentially increase classroom observation to see if there are any underlying issues as to why Quincy is not engaging in the learning, such as cognitive or sensory impacts. And lastly, Quincy's parents have expressed their concerns that his behaviour has not been improving from the previous year. So they'll be continuously contacted throughout the learning process and remain updated on Quincy's progression. Ultimately, if the targeted behaviour continues, they'll be made aware.
For Bart to succeed and engage meaningfully in his learning, the following adaptations are recommended. The content of learning episodes within class should be differentiated where possible to allow him to complete the necessary components at a more manageable, lower level. This content, where possible, should be meaningful and relevant to Bart in order to allow him to engage more effectively. His academic recovery group should be utilised to break down the core components of the curriculum into more manageable chunks through which he can progress. Texts which contain the necessary components for skill development of skills he is lacking will be chosen to identify and remedy areas which are hindering his progress. If texts are of an auditory nature, it is recommended that Bart receive a transcript, which too may be broken down into segments. Bart's learning episodes should be differentiated by content and/or duration to reflect his ability and progression through the course where possible. Within the classroom, use of ICT programs may be utilised to increase his engagement and monitor his progress. When skill deficits are identified, mediated direct instruction sessions within his recovery group sessions are recommended for skills that require attention. These skills may be broken down into learning growth goals, where skills are identified, and he and the teacher can plot his development of these skills. Bart requires a safe and supportive environment in which his exposure to undesirable emotions is minimised. Where this is not possible, there should be a space provided where he can move to if he is feeling stressed and uncomfortable, in which he can receive assistance from a support worker to implement strategies to manage his emotions. Bart should have clear personal best goals and learning growth goals, which allow him to examine his progress and view his performance against previous learning episodes to develop self-worth and provide accessible footing for academic growth. Bart could benefit from peer mentoring from other students within his class, allowing him to model positive academic and social behaviours and learn from other students, whilst developing positive relationships. Bart's academic recovery group requires a quiet, safe and supporting environment with additional support from teachers to develop the necessary skills to engage effectively in classwork and manage his emotions when he faces adversity.
As mentioned before, to best manage Graham's behaviours in the classroom going forward, adopting a teaching and assessing strategy similar to his previous maths teachers would be an appropriate way to start. Visual, creative and tactile stimulus incorporated in his subjects such as English or history should be implemented across both lessons and assessments. Adapting the assessment with respect to the curriculum to provide the option for students to take a written or multimodal response is one learning structure I would try and adopt. It will allow for Graham to potentially use his creative problem-solving skills in a way he finds more understandable. and relatable. This also may provide great opportunities to the other struggling students in the class. As for how it will be taught, chunking will be a crucial aspect to Graham's engagement within the classroom. Graham has been noted to need constant management and prompting in order to achieve a satisfactory level within the classroom. So chunking his tasks into small manageable goals will allow him to focus on simpler tasks. It will allow for any peer help or assistance he's receiving to be simpler, allowing for his peers to focus on their own work. And they won't have to explain big concepts. And finally, it will allow for the teacher to constantly assess his engagement and understanding on the task that's given to him. It will allow for forward planning for the teacher also.